So this morning, as I was perusing through the usual news sources that I use, I noticed that President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have not been on speaking terms. Every time that the Prime Minister of Israel wants to talk to Vladimir Putin of Russia, silence. Putin does not want to talk to him. So something happens. Israel makes a move. Let's first go to Depco.com. Israel takes part in U.S.-led exercise in Ukraine against S-300s. Hooks up with U.S. Kiev ties. At a high point in the interplay of U.S.-Russian rivalries between Syria and Ukraine, Israeli jets were discovered taking part in a Western air drill in Ukraine. On Thursday, November the 1st, Moscow slapped down on Ukraine, as a result, its most extensive sanctions against any country. A short time after sources in Jerusalem announced that Ukraine President Petro Poroshenko would soon come for a visit. These steps are building up for the forthcoming summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Paris on November the 11th. Yes, you see what's going on here. Power play. Major power play is going on between the Western Alliance and the Russian Alliance before November 11th. Interesting. The sanctions decree was therefore tactfully signed by Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev. He ordered a freeze on the Russian assets of 322 Ukrainian politicians and officials and 68 businesses in response to similar Ukrainian measures against Russians. They targeted President Petro Poroshenko's son, Alexei, who manages the family businesses, presidential contender Yulia Tymoshenko, a highly influential voice in Ukraine politics and economy, and the head of Ukraine's SBU security service, Vasyl Hritsak. Interior Minister Arsen Avakov and billionaire tycoon Viktor Pinchuk. The Ukraine president last visited Israel 3 years ago, shortly after Russia expanded its military involvement in Syria. Relations cooled off thereafter during a period of warm interaction between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Putin. Those friendly relations melted away under Moscow's anger over the downing of the Russian spy plane off the Syrian coast on September 17th. It was vented in the flooding of Syria with advanced Russia S-300 air defense missiles, since Moscow had clearly determined to curb Israel's air operations against Iranian assets in Syria, and Putin snubbed, there's a key word right here, snubbed all the prime minister's overtures for a meeting to discuss the crisis. Netanyahu decided to change horses and revived his former ties with Kiev. This week, the Israeli Air Force was reported to be taking part in a U.S.-led clear sky exercise in Ukraine that included practice maneuvers against Russian S-300 and S-400 air defense missiles. All right. So you see what's going on here, folks? This thing has been ratcheted up, not one, not two, but multiple notches. just this past month in October. When you have two national leaders refusing to speak to each other and are arrayed against each other in this manner, is the world capable of reading the handwriting on the wall? That is the question. Once again, when you have two national leaders, well, one is refusing to speak to the other. You see, I need to be a little bit more careful about how I say that. You see, Benjamin Netanyahu has been seeking talks to avert this crisis, and Vladimir Putin does not want to have talks to avert this crisis. You see. So, the actions speak what's in the hearts of these two men. One wants to avoid a crisis, the other one does not want to avoid a crisis. Now, so in this particular article on Debka.com, they refer to yesterday's Debka Weekly 823. So I will read out of some of that. And the title is U.S. and Israel join forces with Ukraine against Russian S-300s. You might, before you think that it contains exactly the same thing, listen up. And you'll get more information here. 8 nations officially participated in Operation Clear Sky. Oh, 8 nations. The U.S.-led military exercise launched this week from Ukraine's Starkostian Tiniv Air Base. In addition to the U.S., they were Belgium, Denmark, Estonia, the Netherlands, Poland, Romania, and the UK. Now listen to how this is worded. This is very interesting. They were to discover that unofficially they had been joined by Israel and the War Games mission had been switched at the last minute. The War Games mission had been switched at the last minute. They were to discover that they had been joined by Israel. That's an interesting way of putting it. And the War Games mission had been switched at the last minute. U.S. and Israeli F-15 jets. This is very important to understand, folks. They want to be able to use F-15s to outfox and outsmart the S-300 and S-400 missile defense systems, you see. We're practicing missions against the advanced S-300 air defense missiles, which Russia had supplied some years ago to the Ukraine and in recent weeks to Syria. Debka Weekly's military sources report that Ukraine is armed with 6 types of Russian air defense systems. 3 short-range self-propelled Kub 2K12, TOR 9K330, and transported C-25 2 medium-range S-300PT transported systems, which are closely related to the mobile all-purpose anti-missile and anti-air S-300V1, 12 Gladiators, and finally a long-range S-200V. A similar array is wielded across the lines by Russia's own forces fighting the Kiev government in eastern Ukraine, as well as on the Russian-Ukrainian border of Crimea. While the types of air defense missiles supplied to Ukraine and Syria are different, the way Russia has deployed them in the two countries is very similar. So, Ukraine is a good place for the US and Israeli forces to test their prowess against those anti-air systems. The Israeli jets flew into Ukraine from Mihail Kogalnitsko military facility near the Black Sea town of Constanza in eastern Romania, home to an American air base. The Israeli Air Force maintains one or two bomber fighter squadrons at this U.S. base. Israel's participation in Operation Clear Sky is thought to have prompted another of Moscow's hands-off warning in Syrian skies. I'm sure it did. I'm sure this really made the Russians angry. Well, Russia, it's your own fault for trying to take hegemony that rightfully belongs to Israel for yourself. But anyway, I will continue. On Wednesday, October 31st, the Russian Defense Ministry's General Igor Konashenkov stated, "At this moment, Russian advisors are preparing Syrian military personnel for operating these advanced air defense systems, S-300s. He then advised hotheads to adequately assess the current situation in the region and refrain from provocative action on the Syrian territory. This piece of advice closely followed the warnings addressed to Israel by his boss, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, after a Russian spy plane was downed opposite the Latakia coast in September 17th, when he too referred to hotheads. Our military sources have also learned that U.S. and Israel naval officers have been working with the Ukraine Navy in recent weeks to set up a new military base on the Sea of Azov. This shallow water is located between Russia's Rostov, Krasnodar, and Crimean regions, which most of the northern coast belongs to Ukraine. Several such complex, far-reaching cooperative projects between the U.S. and Israel were worked out during U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton's visit to Jerusalem in the third week of August, from which he proceeded directly to Kiev. President Donald Trump has also placed his special envoy for Ukraine, Kurt Volker, in charge of U.S.-Israeli-Ukrainian coordination. Volker was heard remarking in September, "Whatever gaps in the Ukraine military's capabilities exist, the U.S. is prepared to sit down and talk with Ukraine about what their needs are. They can buy things through our foreign military sales." It was announced this week that President Petro Poroshenko of Ukraine will pay another visit to Israel as the guest of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On Wednesday, Ukrainian First Deputy Prime Minister Stepan Kubiv said that Ukraine and Israel are preparing to sign a free trade agreement this year. Let me remind everyone, folks, that Europe gets 90%. That's right. Europe gets 90% of its citrus fruits from Israel. So you know, this free trade agreement between Israel and Ukraine is going to further enrage Russia. Poroshenko last visited Israel in December 2015, 4 months after Russia expanded its military presence in Syria. Ties between Kiev and Jerusalem cooled in the interim years, in reverse relation to the warming of Israel's friendly friendly ties with Moscow. That friendship has all but blown away since the loss of the Russian Ilyushin 12 spy plane and its subsequent suppliers of S-300 air defense systems to Syria. President Vladimir Putin continues to snub, listen carefully, folks, continues to snub the feelers Netanyahu has put out for them to meet and try to mend the fences between them in response to the cold wind from Moscow. The prime minister is investing in cooperation, therefore, with Kiev. How much more? How much more evidence does one need to realize and understand that the Ezekiel 38-39 war is about to take place? How much more evidence is necessary? So, just like I did last year, I'm asking everyone to mark their calendar for one specific day. I'll make it easy for you. The first day of Hanukkah. What's the first day of Hanukkah? Where does that fit in all this? Folks, there has been only one prophecy that gives us the clue as to dates. Okay. I said gives us a clue as to dates. Haggai 2, verses 18 through 22. I think I'll use Strong's Concordance here. I think it's necessary for one word. Verse 18. Consider now from this day and upward. What day? He tells you what day it is. Just look at the Hebrew calendar. On the 24th day of the 9th month. Consider it. All right, so he's telling you, look at that. Now look at that day. Just look at it and consider it. And he's saying that he's questioning whether or not they're receiving the blessing of the field. And of course, it's a rhetorical question because they're not. So, even from the foundation that Jehovah's temple was laid, consider it. What day was the foundation of Jehovah's temple laid? Solomon's temple? That day is the 24th day of the 9th month. That is what Hanukkah celebrates. The dedication of the temple, and it's a marker of the day that the foundation was laid. Okay, is the seed yet in the barn? Yes, as yet the vine and the fig trees and the pomegranate, the olive tree, they have not brought forth like they should. From this day, what day? The 24th day of the 9th month, will I bless you. Now, Zerubbabel is Jehovah's sign. Verse 20, yet again the word of Jehovah came into Haggai in the 24th day of the said month, which was the 9th month, saying, speak to Zerubbabel. All right, Zerubbabel means begotten in Babylon, a leader of returning Israelite exiles. So when you read where it says that he's going to make Zerubbabel a sign. What you have to do is look up the definition: begotten in Babylon, a leader of returning exiles. So, what we have here is the sign of Zerubbabel is the promise that all Jews and all Israel begotten in Babylon will be returned to Israel, to the Holy Land. That's what the sign is. That's the promise. So now that we understand this, speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen, the Goi. I will overthrow their chariots, their tanks, their mobile missile launchers, the whole 9 yards, and those that ride in them, and the Sus. Five, 4, 8, 3. A type of bird, not horses. They're airplanes. They're jet fighters. Come on. They're jet fighters. Overthrow them. And their riders. Those shall come down. Everyone by the sword of his brother. In that day, saith Jehovah of hosts, will I take you, O Zerubbabel, begotten in Babylon, leader of returning exiles. My servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith Jehovah, and I will make you as a sign. So on that day, listen carefully, folks. On the 24th day of the 9th month, Jehovah is going to raise a sign while the nations are destroying each other. He's going to raise a sign, and the sign is going to say, all you Israelites who were conceived and born in Babylon, the world, come back to Zion. That's the sign. Backed up in Revelation. Well, let's look in Jeremiah 51:45 first, and then we'll go to Revelation, because you see, we need to go to the prophets. So in Jeremiah 51, severe judgment against Babylon. Now, this one right here in Jeremiah 51 was the first destruction of Babylon. Okay? So we'll go to now. And the Medes and the Persians did destroy him, exactly as Jeremiah is written in Jeremiah 51. All right, in verse 45 it says, my people, get you out from the midst of her, and deliver you every man his soul from the fierce anger of Jehovah. And lest your heart faint, and you fear for the rumor that shall be heard in the land. A rumor shall both come 1 year, and after that in another year shall come a rumor, and violence in the land, ruler against ruler. Ruler against ruler. Kingdom against kingdom. You see. So, in verse 49, why is this happening? Why is this going to happen to the Goyim as written in Haggai 2, verses 18 through 22? Why? You will find the answer in verse 49 of Jeremiah 51. As Babylon has caused the slain of Israel to fall, so at Babylon shall fall the slain of all the earth. You that have escaped the sword, you, O Israel, who have escaped the sword, go away, run for your lives, don't stand still. Remember Jehovah from afar, and let Jerusalem come to mind. Okay, now let's go to Revelation. And so the Revelation version is the second, or it might even be the third destruction, because you see, Constantinople was destroyed by the Crusaders, fulfilling the prophecy of the 10 toes destroying that great city. Okay? But in Revelation, in the very last part of the destruction of Babylon, is the actual destruction of Rome and all her satellite cities, all the cities that follow Rome, which be all of Western Europe. And, well, you got to look at South America. They follow Rome too. And we shall see about North America. I don't know yet. All right, Revelation 18 and verse 4. Remember the sign of Zerubbabel. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and Jehovah has remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you. Rewarded. Who did she reward? Who did she treat miserably? Who did this Babylon, so to speak, mistreat throughout from 67 AD to at least 1945? Who was it? If you do not know, you need help. You need a lot of help. It's the Jews who they mistreated, and the followers of Yehoshua, the Anabaptist Sabbatarians, who were treated exactly like the Jews because they kept the Sabbath. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works. In the cup which she filled, do to her double, because she has glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much in torment and sorrow give to her, for she said in her heart, I sit as a queen, and am no more a widow. I shall see no sorrow. Therefore her plagues shall come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is Jehovah Elohim who judged her. Now, I often considered this. Yes, Jerusalem received double punishment from ancient Babylon and from Rome. But when it says reward her double here, I've often thought that it's referring to Constantinople and Rome. And of course, Constantinople was destroyed by the 10 kings, as is written by the 10 toes, as written in Book of Revelation. And the first Rome was going to be saved for the last. So I'm supposing that is to reward her double. Okay. And you can read all that happens to this, to Babylon, right? And so, verse 20, rejoice over her, you heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for Jehovah has avenged you on her. Okay. Verse 24, and in her was found the blood of prophets, that's the apostles, the 2 witnesses, and of the saints, that's the Jews. But wait, hold it. That's not all. That's not all. And of all that were slain upon the earth. Now you see how grave the situation is for this world. So I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks. I have an extremely tender heart. I don't like to see bloodshed. I do not like to see death. I am absolutely horrified by death. Okay? It is something that I have not been able to get out of my system, especially after the death of my dearly beloved wife 25 years ago. And so I know it's going to be extremely difficult for me to see this. Yet, it says right here, rejoice. It says to the prophets, rejoice, to the apostles, rejoice, and to the Jews, rejoice. All the heavens rejoice. I have to understand that vengeance is coming. And I have to remind myself of what this world how this world has murdered millions, perhaps even billions of people over the course. When I say this world, I mean the Roman world has murdered millions, perhaps billions of people over the course of a couple of millennia. One's eyes cannot be blinded to this truth, being blinded by the ease and the prosperity of this world as we see it today, with all the modern conveniences, air conditioning, automobiles, smartphones, computers, internet, food at the snap of a finger. One cannot be mesmerized by that, because these kinds of things, they blind the eyes of people to understand the gravity of what the Roman world has done to the innocent to millions, perhaps billions of innocent over the course of 2,000 years. And all of these crimes against humanity has accumulated to the point that it has reached unto heaven and requires judgment from the Almighty. He had already said he will no longer judge the earth with water, with a flood over the entire earth. So there is only one thing left: fire. Please remember, folks, while you are partaking of modern technology, of what the world's finest has to offer, you may not forget all the crimes that the Roman Western world has perpetrated upon the apostles, upon the prophets, upon the Jews, and upon the followers of Yehoshua and everybody else who they murdered. Because if you do forget, you will be like Lot's wife.